Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Sunday morning science broadcast. Today, we're going to talk more about memes. We talked about it quite a bit last week, but there's been a lot of confusion I've seen in the comments. And I just spoke yesterday with YouTuber Adam Friended, and he put up, I haven't seen it yet, but he put up our discussion yesterday, and there's a lot of confusion about memes. How it is that memes evolve. Do they really evolve? Uh, the conversation is actually kind of frustrating because I find this topic actually really simple to understand, but a lot of people don't. And it's maybe it's because I've been reading about this stuff and kind of following it for it's probably been 10 years or so, and I'm excited to see what kind of questions you guys have about memes in the comments today. And yeah, let's just dig in. So I've got a presentation as usual. So let me share my screen. Hopefully you can see that there. So what exactly is a meme? And I want to talk about what exactly memes are and why does it matter? Like, why should we care? You know, the field of memetics got going in the 90s and then it kind of died out. Why is it that I think that we should bring this back? And I think this is really important. Just a reminder for those who maybe didn't see last week's, there was a debate recently between Richard Dawkins and Bret Weinstein about religion. Is religion, well, it was about a bunch of different things, but one of the things I talked about is religion an adaptation that helps people survive and reproduce, or is it a virus? Because Dawkins often talks about religion as being a virus of the mind. And if you really look at how memes work, you know, religion is a collection of memes. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just talk about what a meme is. So a meme is a unit of cultural transmission or a unit of imitation. And you probably heard about internet memes, but the concept is actually much older than internet memes. It comes from Dawkins' book, The Selfish Gene. And this is how he defines it: a unit of cultural transmission or a unit of imitation. So a famous example is the idea of a wheel. If you don't know what a wheel is and you're walking down the street, you're walking down, I guess you wouldn't have a street if there wasn't wheels. You're walking down the pathway in your village and you see somebody rolling something heavy on top of a wheel. Wow. You see it happening and you immediately want to imitate that next time you have something heavy to move. And so the invention of a wheel, the idea of a wheel, is really easy to transmit. Lots of different ideas. Any idea that we might have can be transmitted. If I think that wearing a shirt with the top button undone is a good idea, I can spread that and tell other people, hey, if you feel like your button-up shirt's a little bit stuffy, just undo the top button and you're fine. So these are all types of, any idea that you might have is considered a meme. And memes are replicators because ideas can be shared. And when an idea is shared, it gets copied into someone else's mind. And so a meme is a replicator in the mindosphere, just like a gene is a replicator in the biosphere. So there is a bunch of humans with minds, and there's only so much space in these minds. There's limited space, and these memes can replicate to fill that space. So a meme is a genuine replicator. Should it be thought of as a virus or a parasite? Well, first of all, let's just talk about what evolution is. Evolution is replication plus modification plus selection. When we have those three things, we have adaptive evolution. And this is basically the equation that Darwin gave us. He explained that animals and plants can evolve because of descent with modification, replication with modification, acted upon by selection. and he focused most of his attention on natural selection, but of course there's sexual selection and artificial selection and so on. So genes really evolve because they are replicators, and they are capable of modification, mutation, and they undergo selection. Memes are also genuine evolving entities because memes really do replicate from one brain to another. They do so with slight modifications. When those modifications happen, they are then passed down. Let me try and give you an example of this. A lot of people like to eat potatoes, right? And a lot of people like to peel their potatoes before eating them. And some people might use a potato peeler. Some people might use a knife. And depending on what you saw when you were a child, you are going to do the same. So if you go to different families and watch them preparing potatoes, you'll notice that they peel their potatoes in different ways. And this is because of the memes that have been duplicating in these different little cultural groups and family lines. There are actually some people that won't peel their potatoes. They want to eat their potatoes with the skin on. So that's a different meme. And that meme, the "you should eat potatoes with skin on them," is in direct conflict with the meme "you should peel potatoes before eating them." Those two memes cannot exist in the same space. So they are actually competing with each other, just like genes. The genes that code for blue eyes are in competition with the genes that code for brown eyes within a population. The memes that tell us to peel our potatoes are in direct competition with the memes that tell us not to peel our potatoes. So they really do evolve. They really do compete for existence in the mindosphere. Here's an example of two competing memes. The Earth is 6,000 years old versus the other meme, the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. And what we found when studying genetics is that certain genes do really well, not on their own, but they do really well with others, by cooperating with other genes. And it turns out that the same is true for memes. So whether or not you're going to accept this first meme or this second meme here, if you hear them both, is going to depend on a whole bunch of other memes that you'll already have in your head. And here's just a short example, a quick example of some memes that might make it easier for you to accept the 6,000-year-old one. The Bible is the literal word of God. The Bible is infallible. The Earth is 6,000 years old. If you have those first two memes, it makes it very likely that you're going to accept that third meme, and especially you're going to accept that over the conflicting meme, the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. If you happen to possess the other memes, we can learn about reality through careful observation, and scientific consensus is generally trustworthy. Then when you hear that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, you are more likely to accept that meme instead of the Earth is 6,000 years old meme, because of course scientific consensus is, for multiple fields of research, that the Earth is billions of years old, not thousands of years old. So this is how memes are competing in the mindosphere. Memes team up and cooperate with other memes to be more sticky, to replicate more efficiently. And all of this happens just naturally. It's because of descent with modification acted upon by selection. These things happen naturally. Now, of course, humans can get together and try and engineer memes that they think will be sticky. Marketing teams do this and so on. But for the most part, memes evolve on their own within the mindosphere. And oftentimes they create extremely complicated superstructures, such as religions, such as economic systems, cultural norms, worldviews, that we inherit these worldviews, we inherit these mimetic systems, and we don't really know how they work. It really takes careful studying to understand how they work, where they come from, how different memes are cooperating with each other, and so on. It's a complicated, serious business if you actually want to dig into it and try and figure this stuff out. It's not simple. It's not super straightforward. We do things all the time and we don't know why. And a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, our behaviors are being dictated by the memes that we happen to have inherited or accepted into our minds. Now, one of the things that Adam was talking about yesterday in our conversation is that there are some ideas that he thinks are just evolved ideas. And I think he's right. When we are born, we are not blank slates. There are some basic programs that are running in our brains. One for a baby is, right, the things that we call instincts are these basic programs. And so one of those would be emulate your parents, copy your parents. That's something that babies or small children have in their minds. They pretty much trust their parents. They'll obey. They'll believe what their parents say. They'll try to emulate their parents, do what their parents do. And then you have during puberty that seems to get uprooted instinctually to find people who are successful in your community and emulate them, copy their behavior. And so there's a little bit of a switch in the instinctual program as we go through puberty. And that makes kids rebel against their parents and so on, and causes all sorts of drama within a family. But it's actually really good for the child because they're learning how to find wisdom elsewhere, and they're going through a rebellion period that will allow them to move on and start their own lives and be their own successful adults. So there are these basic programs that are underlying things, but memes run on top of that, and memes can exploit the instincts that we have. I say exploit. Normally the word exploit is like a bad word, but it's not necessarily a bad word. Memes just take advantage of our natural tendencies. So fast food is exploiting our instincts to eat high-calorie food, to eat food that's salty, to eat food that's sugary, and so on. Fast food restaurants and the marketers that work there can exploit these instincts and then give us the meme, eat at McDonald's. Eat at McDonald's is a meme. Eat fatty foods, eat high-calorie foods is an instinct that we have. We're driven towards these sorts of things because in our ancestral past, those would not have been very abundant. And so when they were abundant, we needed to take advantage of them so that we wouldn't starve later on, right? So memes can be designed by a marketing team to take advantage of our instincts, but naturally memes will just evolve on their own to take advantage of our instincts. The ones that end up being really successful in filling up the space in the mindosphere are the memes that happen to kind of tickle our instincts, I guess. So there's that question I asked: should memes be thought of as viruses? Should memes and meme complexes? So our religion is a giant meme complex. It's a whole bunch of memes working together, and it's spread from person to person, mostly spread from parent to child. Should we think of a religion as a parasite, or should we think of it as an adaptation? And last week I talked about the ways in which religion does act as an adaptation. I compared myself to my brother. I am not religious. My brother is a Mormon, and it just so happens that Mormonism promotes, as crazy as Mormonism is, as weird as all the memes are inside Mormonism, it happens to promote all of these things that give you an evolutionary advantage over your neighbors. Things like, have lots of kids, form stable families, believe in an afterlife, which, people who believe in an afterlife are less likely to commit suicide, for example. People who are religious tend to have strong communities and they can deal with stress better. This isn't always the case, but they tend to be. And the statistics are pretty spectacular. Mormons have, on average, 2 times as many children as non-religious folks. So Bret Weinstein, in this debate against Richard Dawkins, he says, oh, religion's an adaptation. Look, it's doing all the things that you would want an organization to do to increase your biological fitness. Of course, religions also cause a lot of weird stress and problems for individuals, but if you look at the types of problems that it causes, those problems don't usually hurt an individual's ability to reproduce. There are exceptions to this, like a Catholic priest doesn't reproduce, but even though Catholicism makes a certain number of its people not have kids, overall Catholics have more kids than non-religious people, even when you add the priests into that equation. So overall, religion is helping people survive and reproduce. So should we think of it as an adaptation, or is it just something else going on here? I would say no. Religion should not be thought of as a virus like Dawkins says it is, or as an adaptation like Bret Weinstein says it is. Religion should be thought of as a symbiont. And here we have a coral, and inside of its flesh are little symbionts, photosynthetic symbionts called zooxanthellae. And what they do is they photosynthesize. They turn light and carbon dioxide into sugar, and they excrete that into their host. And zooxanthellae are really interesting because they can actually live a little bit on their own. They can spread from coral to coral, but they don't do very well on their own. And corals can actually live for a little bit without zooxanthellae, but not very long. There's this mutual dependency that they have on one another. So these are two separate evolving entities. And this is what I really want to drive home this point. Genes are true evolving entities. Memes are true evolving entities. But oftentimes they work together because they act like symbionts. There are many types of symbiosis. A lot of times when we talk about symbiosis, we think that symbiosis is always a mutualistic relationship. If you talk to biologists that study symbiosis, they'll tell you no. Some symbionts, hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself. In a symbiotic relationship, the zooxanthellae here, they are symbionts, and the coral is also considered to be a symbiont. But when one member in a symbiotic relationship is much larger than the other, or particularly if one lives inside of the other, we call one the host and we call the smaller one the symbiont, but they're actually both symbionts. But today I'm going to be talking about hosts. When I talk about a host, I'll be talking about the larger symbiont that hosts the smaller one. So there are many types of symbiosis. Parasitic symbiosis is when the symbiont is actually hurting the host. And this is very common. Of course, there's all kinds of parasites. This is a form of symbiosis, but it's parasitic symbiosis. Then there's commensalistic symbiosis. This is where the symbiont is living inside of a host or near a host, interacting with a host, but doesn't really hurt that host in any way. It gains something by hanging out with the host, but the host gains nothing from it. And this little critter on the right here that I'm showing here, this is a eyelash mite, and these guys are commensalistic symbionts that live on our faces. Most of us have these in our eyelashes, and they're little organisms, and they eat dead skin cells. They don't help us, they don't hurt us, they're just hanging out. And then finally, there are mutualistic forms of symbiosis, and the zooxanthellae and the stony coral symbiosis is a mutualistic symbiosis. The zooxanthellae help the corals survive and reproduce, and vice versa. And the reason that people who study symbiosis like to say that there's all these three different types of symbiosis is because something that starts out parasitic can evolve to be commensalistic under the right selection pressures. And something that is commensalistic can evolve to either become mutualistic or parasitic, depending on selection pressures. There are times where something that used to be mutualistic, something that used to live in harmony with its host, might want to hurt its host in order to survive and reproduce. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But Among parasites, there are two main types of parasites. There are obligatory parasites. So some symbionts hurt their host as a normal part of their life cycle. HIV is an example of this. HIV spreads by making the host cell rip open. So HIV doesn't have to kill the organism that it's inhabiting, but it does have to kill the organism's cells, and that hurts the host. That weakens the host's ability to survive and reproduce. Then there are also opportunistic parasites. So some parasites are usually commensalistic or mutualistic, but act as parasites under certain circumstances. So many gut microbes will grow too numerous when competitors are taken out with antibiotics. It's not that they've actually evolved to hurt their host. HIV has evolved to hurt the host. It's a very important part in HIV's life cycle to rip open the cell that it's growing in. But a lot of times people will take antibiotics and they'll get like an increase of yeast in their intestines, and to the point to where they get sick. And that is not like an evolved trait necessarily, that these yeasts have. It's not an essential part of their life cycle. It's just that all their bacterial competitors were taken out by these antibiotics, and they just expanded like crazy, and they started causing problems for their host. We call this an opportunistic parasite. I think you could break down opportunistic parasites down even more to say that some have literally evolved the ability, have actually evolved the ability to become parasitic. And it's a benefit to them, but only under certain circumstances. And under other circumstances, they're nice to their host. So versus, accidentally hurting their host when bacteria are taken out. But there's lots of ways to look at these. And of course, there's always blurry lines with all of this. There's blurry lines between parasitic organisms and commensalistic organisms and mutualistic organisms. These are just categories we try to group things into because it helps us study them, right? Cholera is an extremely fascinating symbiont. It's a symbiont that lives inside of our stomachs, and we normally consider it to be a pathogen. We consider it to be a parasite. But it turns out there's this guy, Paul Ewald, who's been studying them for the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. And he's found that there's actually lots of different strains of cholera. Normally we think of cholera as a disease that infects poor countries. And what will happen is it'll give its host diarrhea so bad that they will die. If you have a really nasty strain of cholera, you have to be drinking tons of salty liquids because it depletes of your water and your electrolytes. And you need to be given liquids intravenously because you can't drink water fast enough. You're dehydrating so quickly that you're going to die unless you're getting liquids infused right into your bloodstream. So it's an extremely nasty disease if you get a virulent strain. But what Paul Ewald noticed is that there's actually lots of benign cholera in wealthy countries. Countries that are doing good also have surprisingly large amounts of people infected with cholera, but the cholera strain is being nice to its host. It's being gentle on its host. People don't even know that they're sick. They're not sick. They're just carrying cholera. And he studied the differences, the genes and these different strains of cholera. And there's the sources down here on the slide. There's a NCBI paper, and then there's also a TED talk that Paul did on asking, can we domesticate germs? But here he learned that cholera in countries where people are not taking good care of their water supply, they're not filtering their water properly, cholera can spread by giving people really bad diarrhea. That gets into the water system, and then other people drink that water and get cholera. That spreading mechanism does not work in wealthier countries where the water is always really well purified before it's drinking. And because of that, in countries where people have taken care of their water supply, cholera evolves to keep the host healthy so that the host will go to work and hang out with friends and every time they go to the bathroom, a little bit of cholera, comes out the rear end. And if you don't perfectly wash your hands, that little bit of cholera can spread to your friends, or, when you shake someone's hand at work and so on. So by keeping the host nice and healthy, the cholera can spread not quite as fast as the parasitic version of cholera in a poorer country, but it can still spread and survive and make a really good living. And he realized that if we want to combat cholera when there's an outbreak, the first thing we should do is, of course, help the people that are sick, give them liquids so that they don't die. But while we're doing that, we need to clean the water supply. That's where we should focus all of our time, attention, and money. And this has revolutionized the way that we treat cholera when there is an outbreak. Absolutely wonderful research by Paul Ewald. Well, it turns out that memes are exactly the same. Just like memes, cholera can evolve to be either parasitic to its host or commensalistic towards its host, depending on selection pressure. Why? Because just like memes, cholera is its own evolving agent, but it depends on its host for transmission. Memes, the ideas that we have, they depend on us for transmission. And because of that, they can actually, under certain selection pressures, evolve to help us out. So when we see these religions that are so helpful to their members, helpful in helping them survive and reproduce, well, that is a result of symbiosis, mutualistic symbiosis of symbionts. So Bret Weinstein, during his Dawkins debate, did not like the idea that memes are evolving on their own. He didn't like the idea that religions are viruses, and instead he wanted to call religions adaptations. And he's come up with this theory about how religions evolve that is extremely complex. I finally got a hold of his paper and read through it. It has to do with what he calls lineage selection, which is it's a really messy theory that he's put together to try to explain how it is that religion evolves. And he basically rejects this meme idea that memes are their own independent evolving entities, because memes, he finds, are so helpful. These religious memes that have evolved are so helpful. So he doesn't think that they're really truly evolving as their own entities, because he thinks that if they were evolving as their own entities, they must be parasitic and not helpful. But we always find them to be so helpful that he's doubting the whole legitimacy of memes. And he's made this prediction saying that memes should show no interest in passing themselves down when it is not in the biological interest of the creature whose mind it is operating. That is a prediction that he made. That is a falsifiable prediction that he made. And that prediction is absolutely false. And here is an example of memes that I hold in my own brain that are actually reducing my personal evolutionary fitness. Dogs are better than kids. My evolutionary purpose to reproduce is stupid. It's the same purpose that maggots and tapeworms have. And I actually got that meme by listening to Bret. He says something similar to that in his talks. Always use birth control. That's a meme that I follow. Never cheat on the lady. My partner and I, she doesn't want to have kids. I don't want to have kids. We have dogs instead. And we always use birth control, and we don't cheat on each other. So a combination of those two things is hurting our reproductive success, right? And then finally, having children is bad for the environment. So all those memes, those live in my brain. And those memes spread extremely fast. These are not, I'm not just a weird person for believing these things. These things are common in our culture. And all of these memes, especially when they're in combination like this, they are detrimental to the survival and not the survival, but they're detrimental to the reproduction of their host. So I'm losing the evolution game because I believe these things. So memes should show no interest in passing themselves down when it's not in the biological interest of the creature whose mind it is operating. That's obviously false. These memes are super popular. They're spreading like crazy throughout our country. and they are definitely against the evolutionary interests of their hosts. Now, Bret seems to believe in some sort of a group selection. He calls it lineage selection. And Adam Friended was having troubles too. He seems to accept some sort of group selection. He thinks that maybe group selection is what's causing the ideas that we have in our cultures to evolve. He thinks that they're actually products of our genes, not products of memes evolving on their own, which is, again, what Bret Weinstein thinks. Here is an example of a parasitic meme that literally spreads by hurting its host. This is school shootings. This is a memorial, kind of a makeshift memorial that was put up after Columbine, the Columbine high school tragedy. And every time there's a school shooting like this, the meme gets spread. It's just like HIV. It depends on hurting its host in order to spread. The people who did the shooting in this case also died in the process. So the meme to shoot everybody at school died with these people that shot everybody at school, but it also spread like crazy throughout the country. These kids, I'm purposely not showing their faces and telling you their names, because these kids got on the cover of Time magazine for shooting up their school. They were heroes among people who were bullied and so on. And actually, there are people who will dress up like them for Halloween still. There are girls that will go to the memorial to worship the killers. It's insane how far this meme spread by hurting its host. A meme spread by hurting its host. And also, wow, Walmart, you guys are really exploiting a tragedy there, putting up your advertisement at a this school tragedy brought to you by Walmart. But anyway, this is a really clear example of a meme that is absolutely destructive and spreads by hurting its host. This is evidence that memes are symbionts evolving independently. And because of that, they can evolve to become parasitic. They can evolve to become commensalistic. They can evolve to become mutualistic. So here's another list of memes that spread, that are very popular in our culture today, but are bad for groups at every level. So, I mean, I'm not a group selectionist, but Bret seems to be. And here I'm giving Bret this list just to make sure that he understands very clearly that his prediction is false, because at every single level, we have memes that are spreading throughout our communities that are destructive to different groups. So one that is destructive to families is that kids are bad for the environment. That's going to make families smaller, right? One that's destructive to churches. All religions lead to God. That's a popular idea in a lot of religions today, and it tends to weaken the strength of that religious community, because it's better for their religion to think that only theirs is true, so that their members keep going to their religion. Political party. Let's divide ourselves into smaller and smaller competing groups. This is something that we see on the left right now, and this is kind of a result of us losing the presidential election, and so many people have different ideas as to how they can win the next presidential election, and there's so much division, and there's people. The left is broken up into further and further splintering groups, and that's destructive for their ability to win against the right in the United States during the next election. That's going to be a really big problem for them. And then nation. Let's get rid of all immigration laws because current laws are too harsh. This is another thing that's in the United States. People have been protesting, saying that we want to end border regulation because there's all of these nasty things happening at the border, and we don't want to see these nasty things happening at the border. And instead of changing the laws that exist there to make things less horrible, some people are protesting and bringing signs saying that we need to end border patrol in general. We need to get rid of all border laws. That's a bad idea. Like, a nation does need to control its borders in order to stop itself from getting swamped. This is the same reason that your body evolved skin to stop organisms of all types getting inside of you. This isn't having borders and laws that protect borders is extremely important to keep a nation healthy, but we can change those laws and make them less horrible. So anyway, then there's this global meme that's absolutely detrimental to us. To stop other nations from bombing us, let's build thousands of nukes and point them at all other nations. This is what America is doing right now. We have a bunch of nukes pointed at Russia and China. China's doing the same thing. Russia's doing the same thing. We're all pointing nukes at each other. And that was our solution. That is the meme that we have adopted to prevent our enemies from bombing us. And this could kill the entire civilization. It could be the end of us. So there are memes at every level that are bad for the host. I'm going to keep things short and just end it there by saying that I think that memetics, the study of memes, is super important. And I really wish that more people would get on board and start doing this research. The field existed for a while. There was actually a journal online for like 5 years, and it died out in the mid 90s, I think. And I think that people should pick it up again, because understanding memetics, it helps us understand why people hold the ideas that they do and how different ideas cooperate. So it can help us with education. If I'm an educator and I'm frustrated because my students aren't understanding this basic fact that the earth is billions of years old, well, if I understand the set of memes that the 6,000-year-old meme is cooperating with, I can come to understand why it is that they believe that and better, change how I'm teaching things. Or I might just be like, wow, I have to accept the fact that a percentage of my students are just not going to accept this fact. Well, I can have them memorize the fact for a test instead, and know, instead of expecting them to accept it, I can expect them to understand it and understand why we believe that the earth really is billions of years old, even if they don't accept it. Those are my options. Understanding memetics can help us appreciate the contributions of religion and other old cultural memetic complexes. It is almost always the case in biology that when two symbionts have been evolving together for a long period of time, they evolve mutualistic relationships. And the same is true with memes and their hosts. If a set of memes has been with a group of hosts for a long period of time, it will eventually evolve to help that host, because one of the best ways for memes to pass on is from parent to child. And if memes that are being passed from parent to child don't help those children grow up and have more kids, well, those memes are going to go extinct. And because of that, because memes are symbionts that depend on their host for their transmission, memetic systems that have been around for a long time are going to, in general, act as if they are adaptations. They're going to help their host survive and reproduce. And then we can apply what we know of evolution immediately to culture. This is one of the cool things that's been happening with memetics. And if you look at the papers that were done early on in memetics, people are doing that. All these different things that we're learning in disease control, for example. Can we tame cholera? Well, we can also use that exact same information and ask, can we tame religion? Or, can we tame the school shooting meme? Can we do something about that? And then finally, we can use memes as model organisms to better understand how evolution works. Memes evolve way faster than genes do. And because of that, if we started using memes as model organisms, we could actually get good information that would inform us as to how biological systems evolve and how diseases evolve and so on, how parasites evolve. And this can help us better control diseases, understand evolution, and so on. So this is, some people might think that what I just said here is circular reasoning. We can use evolution to understand memes, and then we can use memes to understand evolution. But this is what this does is it's like it's like finding the it's like doing the corner pieces of a puzzle, doing the side pieces of a puzzle. The more pieces that you have, you can play them off of each other to come to better conclusions, to find more puzzle pieces in the future. And so this is, I believe that memetics is an extremely powerful field, potentially extremely powerful field, and people should get back into it. So that's my lesson for today, and I'd like to answer questions now. Hello. So I'm going to the live chat, and I'm going to be looking for anything that's orange. So anyone who did stated clearly, I'm going to be looking at your questions here. So I'm getting a question. I don't really get the difference between a meme and an idea. They're actually, an idea is a meme. But when we talk about memes, we're talking about these evolving entities. So an idea, as it spreads from person to person, can morph over time. So Dawkins used the word meme. It's kind of like a combination of the word mind and gene to really drive home the point that ideas evolve. So yes, a meme is an idea. They are the same thing. Someone says, John, intelligent people must reproduce. Don't leave all the reproduction to religious fanatics. Well, it looks like that's the only question I got. So apparently you guys understand this stuff really well. So that's good. It was really frustrating talking to Adam yesterday because I still don't know if he got it. He doesn't understand the way in which memes really truly act as evolving entities. And I'm curious if that's like a common thing, that other people are having that problem too. Maybe he was able to get it by the time we were done, but I'm not totally sure. It looks like he's actually in the comments section, so maybe he can say if he understands that now. I don't know. But yeah, that's it for questions, it looks like. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep this one, a little shorter than normal. Normally we go for an hour. We went for 43 minutes today. But yeah, I think this is a lot of fun to think about and to contemplate these things. And I would love to hear from Bret Weinstein. I'd love to have him on the show to talk about the ways in which he thinks that we should kind of proceed, because his prediction has been clearly debunked. And I don't know if that means that his overall theory is garbage now, or if that, I just don't know what he would make of this. So I'd love to hear from him on that. I don't think his theory is totally debunked. I think that his theory of, he calls it lineage selection. I would say that he's just misapplying kin selection. But I think that kin selection really is in charge of evolving these kind of basic instinctual programs that memes then exploit and memes then take advantage of. But yeah, I'd love to have him on the show to talk about him with this. Again, I've emailed him and have not gotten a response. So if anybody has good connections with him, let me know. It'd be great to talk to him. Paul says, stated casually, I think it's difficult to grasp how memes evolve because they are not physical entities. Yeah, that was Adam's big holdup. But the thing that Dawkins pointed out is that what we need for evolution to work, being a physical object has nothing to do with evolution. Being a replicator. Evolution works when when a replicator replicates, and there are sometimes modifications, and those modifications are passed on when that modified replicator then replicates again. And when we have natural selection or selection of some sort. So replication plus modification plus selection equals evolution. Anything that can replicate is and do those things is an evolving entity. It is a genuine evolving entity. And Dawkins is not sure about how important his idea of memetics is, for the reason that he thinks that maybe memes don't evolve with enough fidelity to actually create really complex, well-evolved structures. And I think that Bret Weinstein's observation that religions usually do cause people to do really good at surviving and reproducing, I think that Bret Weinstein's observation of this is proof that memes really are evolving entities that do evolve with enough fidelity to produce really complex, sophisticated structures. A religion is a really complex, sophisticated structure that allows its members to survive and reproduce. And it does so in ways that are so weird, so bizarre, that we have to study it to realize how it's doing it. How is it that Mormons are so successful at breeding compared to other groups? What is it about Mormonism that's so successful? And it turns out that the things that make Mormonism successful are weird. Its beliefs, weird beliefs about God, weird beliefs about the family unit, really weird, like completely false beliefs. But those completely false beliefs happen to make you really good at surviving and reproducing and having strong families so that your kids survive and reproduce as well. And the fact that these complex, highly complex religious structures have evolved is evidence that memes really are evolving in a level that is significant and in a way that really is producing legitimate adaptations for these meme complexes. I think the problem with understanding these things is that we generally think of evolution as a sort of conscious process, which it is not. Yes, and this is extra confusing with memes, because memes are ideas, and we think of ideas with our consciousness, right? But it's when these ideas start to spread that it's not really happening so much at a conscious level, right? Nobody wants to spread the school shooting meme, right? Nobody wants to do that. Yet Time magazine put the school shooters on its cover. If you look online, you'll find news articles that have the school shooter's face, all the people that they killed, stats about how many they individually killed, stats about which weapons they used. It's like baseball cards for murderers. And we are promoting this, and we're doing it on accident. We're doing it because this meme has it's evolved to just get our brains in such a weird way that we can't help but sharing it. I mean, I'm sharing it right now. I have consciously, by the way, avoided using their names and faces in this presentation because I think that's one way that the meme spreads even further. But that is a confusion. People think that, there's consciousness, but evolution isn't a conscious process. Therefore, memes can't be evolving through an evolutionary process. But the memes really do. They are replicators, and they are evolving in ways that we do not understand because we don't study them, and we should understand them. So, whoa, I just lost. Someone says, is a destructive cult a meme parasite, whatever kind of it acts more virus-like? So cults, here's something really interesting that we know from studying diseases. When a symbiont first comes in contact with a host, usually it's destructive to that host. And the reason for that is there's more ways to hurt a host than to help a host. And so when a symbiont is new, it's usually acting like a parasite. And this is the same with religions. When religions are new, they're usually acting like parasites. Now, religions, most new religions aren't really all that new. Most of their ideas are super old. And so they've already, a lot of religions out of the gate are helpful to their their members, if they're not dramatically different than other religions that already exist. But a cult is a new religion that is significantly different from other religions, and they often start out very parasitic because they're so new. Like I said, there's more ways to hurt a host than to help a host. An example of this in biology is HIV is super destructive to humans, but that same disease doesn't hurt chimps at all. Chimps carry SIV. They carry a version of HIV, and that's where we think that we got HIV from originally, is from eating chimpanzees. So people who were hunting them, cutting themselves while cleaning the meat, got HIV from chimps. But the HIV does not hurt chimps. It's been evolving with chimps for thousands and thousands and thousands of generations, and it's evolved towards a benign. I don't know that it's mutualistic. I don't know that HIV helps them, but well, I guess it helps scare people from killing them, but it's a benign disease for most chimps that doesn't bother them. For us, it kills us because it's so new. But with time, HIV, we suspect that with time, even if it had never been treated, HIV would eventually evolve towards benignness in humans as well. We carry all sorts of diseases that are benign to us. And you actually, when we had when Europeans made contact with the Native Americans here, we had tons of diseases that we brought with us that weren't a big deal. And when Native Americans got those diseases, it killed them because it hadn't been evolving with them for very long. Their genes were different enough that the diseases we were carrying and we'd already developed commensalistic relationships with were hurting their new hosts. And so that's a huge problem. Let's see. If anything from the way we peel potatoes to political views are considered memes, what aspects of them do you think we should study? Is it the meta aspect of how they evolve? Well, I think we should study all sorts of things. I mean, studying the way that people peel potatoes is actually pretty cool because it's super benign. No one's going to get offended by a study on how we peel potatoes. So people might, be okay with us doing a massive invasive study on how you peel potatoes. We might be less willing to let people study how, study our sex lives and so on. But I think that, as mentioned, studying how it is that memes are transmitted, how it is that they evolve, and how it is that they evolve from being parasitic to benign is really important. By the way, the peeling potato meme seems totally benign, right? You could never kill somebody. That meme could never cause the death of anybody, right? Well, turns out that the pioneers were actually dying because they were peeling their potatoes. Actually, they were dying mainly because the meme that they had accepted this meme that potatoes were for poor people. So when pioneers were getting ready to go across the plains, they would buy supplies, and what was available to them was wheat, salted meats, and potatoes, and a handful of other vegetables and stuff. A lot of people were ignoring potatoes and going for wheat because potatoes were seen as like poor people food. And those that did buy potatoes got some potatoes to bring with them. They would usually peel them before eating them. And it turns out that a lot of people who got stuck because of bad weather had to set up camps in certain areas that were not colonized yet. They could only just eat off their stores that they brought with them. And those that did not bring potatoes and those that were peeling potatoes oftentimes got scurvy, and sometimes they would die. So the peel your potatoes before eating them meme actually turned out to be deadly in some cases, just because there's less vitamins in the potato than there are in the skin. That's not totally true. There's lots of vitamins in the potato as well, and the wheat has no vitamin C in it. So people are getting scurvy if they were just eating wheat. So the weirdest things will turn out to be detrimental. So I guess science is a positive meme. Science is a positive meme unless we invent something that kills us all with it. Then, yeah, maybe it turned out to be a bad meme. I've always wondered about the evolution of ideas when it comes to alternative medicine, how nonsense medicine came to grow and still be so prevalent in cultures. I was just talking to a doctor about this yesterday. So my girlfriend is a nurse and her brother is a doctor. So we were literally talking about this last night. And it's really funny because what happens when he cannot treat a patient, when a patient has a disease and he knows there's no treatment for it, like he knows what the treatments are for diseases. He knows what works and what does not. And a lot of times he'll get patients and he'll say, yeah, you have this disease, it's incurable, and you have between this and this amount of time to live. And that's it. The doctor will just tell you to your face, that's an untreatable disease. Well, a lot of these types of people will go home and be like, screw this, I'm not dying. I'm going to find a cure. And there's a million people out there willing to say, oh yeah, modern medicine is not nearly as efficient as alternative medicine. So that's one of the reasons that alternative medicines, not all alternative medicine is bad. A lot of it is bad. For just one quick example, in Oregon, people who do alternative medicine, one of their main diagnostic tools that they use is a diet. They'll put you on a super plain diet and then start slowly adding things to see if something in your diet was making you sick. This is something that doctors in Oregon weren't doing, but naturopathic doctors were. And naturopathic doctors had a bunch of success in identifying allergies that way. And so now it's actually something that mainstream medicine is doing too. But there are cases where naturopathic doctors or alternative medicine ideas will end up being successful, and that will get marketed by these naturopathic doctors. There are also cases where mainstream medicine will do something horrible. So the painkiller epidemic in the United States, it's killing lots of people. That is something that is mainstream medicine's fault. And the really weird thing about this is that when mainstream medicine does something bad, like causes this epidemic of the opioid crisis, they get blamed for it. And everybody knows it's their fault. But when a naturopathic doctor does something crazy and kills a bunch of kids or does, whatever, it's that doctor gets blamed for it. And that website gets blamed for it, not naturopathic medicine in general. So there's this really weird, by being the outsider, you can always dodge the negative news about other outsiders like you because, oh, well, they're not outsiders in the same way that I am. But if you are the mainstream, you can't dodge those tragedies. You always get blamed for them. That's one of the reasons that I think the alternative medicine meme is so prevalent. Let's see. It feels like memes encompass so many different kinds of ideas and behaviors that a lot of them are already studied by fields like psychology, sociology, religious studies, and so on. Yes, that is true. And actually, that's one of the reasons that I think memetics didn't take off really well, is because, there's a couple of problems with memetics that have to be worked out before it really sticks. And one is, how is it that we parse out individual memes from each other? In religious studies, we talk about doctrines as, an individual doctrine, like Jesus Christ rose from the dead. That's a doctrine that most Christian religions believe. Some might not. Actually, I don't know of any Christian religions that don't. Jordan Peterson doesn't seem to think that Jesus actually rose from the dead, but he still calls himself a Christian. So people have been following different doctrines throughout history, because a lot of doctrines, so the doctrine of virgin birth of a deity, that's a doctrine that predates Christianity. It's super, super ancient. And so people have been following memes across time. But the study of memetics really isn't so much about naming changing the name of an idea to a meme. Like, that's not what it's all about. It's the study of memetics is about studying how it is that ideas evolve, and how it is that they evolve symbiosis, mutualistic symbiosis with other ideas, and mutualistic symbiosis with their hosts, or parasitic interactions with their hosts. This is what the study of memetics is all about. And the study of memetics has gotten kind of kickback from other fields of research because Dawkins has been so adamant about calling religions viruses and just insisting that they are viruses. Well, his insistence that they are viruses, that makes everyone think, well, religions are parasites. When you say that they're viruses, what you're saying is that they are parasites. And it's super obvious to anyone that studies culture that religions aren't best described as parasites on the evolutionary fitness of their tenets. Religions are better described as adaptations, right? As Bret Weinstein has observed. But the reason Dawkins has only seen them as parasites in the past is because Dawkins hates the way that religion interacts with science. So really, when he's saying that religion is parasitic, he means it's parasitic on science. It's parasitic to the set of memes that he holds dear, and that's why he is so upset with religion. And I share his frustration on that aspect. But he is wrong if he thinks that religions are bad for the survival and reproduction of the people that are religious, because they certainly are good. Statistically, at least in the past, they have shown to be good. Let's see. Crashing Thunder says, no question, but I just want to say I appreciate these weekly Sunday morning discussions, lectures. Much more insightful than church. All right. That is a difficult that's a difficult question. Depends on what you mean by Jordan Peterson. Oh, he's trolling there. Yeah. Jordan Peterson has been criticized for using common words in special new ways without telling his audience that he's using them in special new ways. That is very problematic for a communicator. And that's actually a reason for much that like a lot of the people that hate Jordan Peterson hate him because they misunderstand him, and they misunderstand it because he's using words unwisely. And, he acts like he's a victim and of hatred from the public, but a lot of it is his own fault, his word choice. But anyway, that's another conversation for another day. Let's see. A person I met recently mentioned non-authoritative Christianity, even the story of resurrection. He stated didn't have to be true for him to believe in God. Okay. Yeah. Someone says maybe Dawkins is just predicating the dead end of this adaptation by religious world war, like Dodo 1A adaptation, because as old as religion is, it is just a secondary and evolutionary timescale. Yeah, well, I think it is important to start making the case now that if we keep on believing in religion the way that we have in the past, it could really cause Armageddon. Because in the past, we're fighting each other with spears and sticks. Now we have nuclear weapons. And so the divisiveness that religion causes between different groups really could be the end of our civilization when that's combined with the technology given to us by science. So it could be that science and religion join forces to eradicate the human population. That would be horrible. Okay. Let's see. Oh, I want Paul last week kept asking a question, Apologia, or not really asking a question, making a comment that he wanted me to comment on. In Richard Dawkins' The Selfish Gene, he defines a gene as, oh gosh, I better pull up the slides so that I don't screw this up. He has a very specific definition for gene. And it's different than the definition we use for gene today. Richard Dawkins defined a gene in his book as a stretch of genetic material that survives through a large number of successive individual bodies. That's how we define a gene. And Paul asked, isn't that how we define an allele now? So shouldn't the selfish gene be the selfish allele? And yes, Paul, you are correct. That is more or less what we call an allele today. Today, the word gene is synonymous with the older word called cistron. A cistron is a stretch of DNA that ends up being coded for, well, that ends up summoning RNA polymerase to create a chain of RNA. That's what we typically call a gene. And some biologists only consider a stretch of DNA to be a gene if it ends up coding for a protein. Others are okay with if it just codes or if it just acts as a template for a strand of RNA. So there's confusion in what a gene is. But yeah, Richard Dawkins' definition of a gene is the modern definition of an allele. So you are correct, Paul. And I finally redeemed myself by answering your question, hopefully. Even though I see that you're not here in the comments today. Shannon is, she'll tell you. Someone says, I don't like how militant Dawkins is. I think we need to be tolerant if we expect tolerance from religious people. Yeah, so actually, the reason that I started Stated Clearly, my other channel, is because I wanted to, my friends and neighbors when I was living in Tennessee, they were all Southern Baptists, and they hated evolution. And I wanted to teach evolution to them. And they weren't really willing to read textbooks because they're too long and technical. And so there's all the stuff by Dawkins that was online. And his books are great. And I wanted to share them with my friends. But Dawkins' work tends to be peppered with little insults towards Christianity. And I knew that they wouldn't keep listening if they were being insulted in the middle of this lesson on biology. So that was actually one of the reasons that I decided I need to create my own materials, my own teaching materials. And that's one of the reasons that I started Stated Clearly. It's because of Dawkins isn't the only one who does this. A lot of people who are really good at teaching evolution like to insult religion a lot while they do it. And that can be problematic. Let's see. Okay, I think that answers questions. Well, that was fun. So long for now. Until next week, stay curious.